Welcome to Beyond the Scoreboard, the show that gets behind the trillion-dollar business of sports. And what a week it is. The NBA and NHL ends their seasons no matter what. Major League Baseball heating up, golf major, tennis major, NASCAR, IndyCar focusing on the middle of their seasons as well. And how about the soccer center stage, both on the men's and women's side? You want to see it all in an organized way. Look at our 15 to watch, plus 5 tech topics, plus 5 philanthropic topics. Look at NBCWashington.com, at Rick Horrow, HorrowSports.com. Subscribe to us on the Apple Podcast, Google Play, Audio Boom, Stitcher, iTunes, or wherever content is. It is a huge week. We'll talk about the NBA from somebody who basically is one of the iconic Mount Rushmore guys of the NBA, Pat Williams, the Philadelphia 76ers, the Orlando Magic, and otherwise. But first, let's get to some of the NBA issues. And one of the things that happens at the end of the season, you take stock in what works and what doesn't. And one of the most valuable things that's happening from the NBA perspective is jersey sales. And not only jersey sales, but patch sales. According to Synopsis Sports, the Lakers jersey patch with Wish, their sponsor, most valuable during the 18-19 season. $9.3 million in value, up from $4.9 million the prior year. Why? King, LeBron James. Wish displaced Goodyear, which held the top jersey patch last season. Why? Well, that's Cleveland, and that's the Cavaliers, and that's LeBron. But next to Nike's apparel sponsorship, the jersey patch is the biggest sponsor location in an arena on social media. It's worth noting that due to the variety of factors, value, clarity, prominence, visibility, size, placement, and share of voice, the images actually generate 86% of overall social media, those still images, as compared to 14% for video. And look for these numbers to increase exponentially in the next few years. Well, the Warriors didn't have the season everybody planned, at least at the beginning and through the early stages of the playoffs, but this clearly was the last season at Oracle Arena, opening the new Chase Center next year. And the finals games at Oracle, the secondary market, the average ticket price, well over $3,000. The only higher price for the remaining Raptors games is where? In Toronto, $3,600. To keep commanding these prices, the Warriors continue to have to win, but clearly one iconic era is over. Oracle Arena. That's the NBA. But the biggest issue the NBA has had to sustain and thrive, and you look to your elder statesmen. Pat Williams broke in sports as a player with the Miami Marlins in 1962. Went to the Sixers, the Bulls in 69, Atlanta, and he was basically involved and architect of the 1983 Sixer, Tony Dawkins, obviously Dr. J, Billy Cunningham, world champion in Philly, a hero, but he didn't stop there. He created the Orlando Magic, co-creator in 1986. I had the honor of working with him when I was helping to put together the Miami Heat. We were side by side when they were going to take 3 franchises in. Credible presentations all around. Ended up with 4, Miami, Orlando, Charlotte, and Minnesota. Pat Williams brought 23 players who are now involved from his playoff teams at 23 seasons, 5 NBA Finals, 19 former players of his have become head coaches. He's got 18 kids, 14 adopted from 4 nations between 1983 and 1980 and 93. He is truly a special individual. Perspective on the NBA and otherwise during the NBA Finals, here's Pat Williams. Rick Horrow, just pleased, humbled, honored to be with a mentor, personal friend, father of basketball in Orlando, father of sports in many ways. We'll talk about the 87 Orlando Magic in a minute. Pat Williams, co-founder of the Magic, thank you very much for doing
Rick,
this.
Welcome to our building. Welcome to Orlando. Good to see you.
Good to see you, too. So you grew up in Philly, and an insider with the Phillies, had enough information with the Phillies and kind of started the process for your knowledge of sports with the Phillies, around the Phillies. Tell that story. Talk about how you got involved in that.
Well, Rick, I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, played ball through high school, went to Wake Forest on a baseball scholarship, and caught for the Deacons for 4 years. In June of 1962, I had graduated, and I wanted to get into baseball. Fortunately, I was a friend of the owner of the Phillies, Bob Carpenter. We met. He offered a $500 bonus to sign, $400 a month. I was absolutely ecstatic. And he said, "You're going to Miami," which was then Phillies Farm Club. And his last words to me were, "Keep your eyes and ears open on and off the field." Well, I didn't fully understand, but later I found out that the scout for the Phillies in North Carolina, Wes Livengood, had turned in reports on me as a ball player, but he also said in that report, has a future in the front office. So anyway, I ended up in Miami for the 62 season, 63. The GM of the club was a fellow named Bill Durney, and he was a wonderful, wonderful mentor, taught me the ropes of minor league baseball, and that led to the opportunity to go to Spartanburg, South Carolina, which was then a Phillies Farm Club, and I was there for 4 years, which laid the foundation for everything that's happened ever since. So, Rick, my goals were all in baseball. You know, I played enough baseball to get a feel for it, and I wanted to get to a major league team and end up being a GM of a big league ball club, but something happened along the way.
And we'll talk about what happened, but it is ironic that one of our benefactors and good friends of the show is Cal Ripken. And so yet another person kind of planted the seed in Miami for baseball, just like Cal did, ironically, as well. Talk about Bill Veeck. I understand he was one of your mentors. What did Bill Veeck teach you about sports, life, and promotion?
Well, it's interesting because in that summer of 1962, there was an off day in that season, and I was visiting around, went to Burdine's bookstore, department store. You remember Burdine?
You were dating ourselves, ladies and gentlemen.
I ended up in the book department, and there on the front table was this book called Veeck is in Rec, and this picture of Bill Veeck on the front cover. I bought it. It was pre-signed by him, amazingly. $3.95, 400-page book. That would cost you $35 today. Yeah. But I bought it and was absolutely absorbed as Bill Veeck shared his story. And he made reference numbers of times to Bill Durney in St. Louis, who was the GM of this team I was with Miami. So when the season ended, I asked Bill Durney if he could help me reach and get to see Bill Veeck in his home in Easton, Maryland. I lived in Wilmington, Delaware, not that far away. And that all came about, and I went to see Bill Veeck, cold turkey, and hoped just to shake hands. And about 6 hours later, I left. And my life had been really transformed by this remarkable man. I stayed in touch with him. He was a mentor. He was a friend. He was a ally, for 25 years. And what did I learn? Well, many things. I wrote a book a few years ago, Rick, called Marketing Your Dreams, Life Lessons I Learned from Bill Veeck. One of them was read. Bill Veeck was a voracious reader. Secondly, it's good to have fun at the old ballpark. You can't beat fun. Don't sell the games on the won and loss column. Too risky, but you can guarantee fun. I also learned from him in the importance of public speaking. That's really the main way that Bill sold his teams, out in front of people.
Well, and words to live by today, very clearly. So, and it's all as relevant in all sports. So you're making a transition, and you made it successfully, obviously. Reflect back on 83. You're with the Sixers. They win the NBA championship. And so talk a little bit about that process and how you put that group together. Tell that story.
Well, that was an interesting process because we, little by little, I came to the Sixers in the heels of that 9-73 disaster, which will always be remembered. And we had to really build from scratch. We started drafting Darryl Dawkins out of high school, drafted Lloyd Free, lured George McGinnis over from the other league, lured Caldwell Jones over from the other league. We then made that huge deal, $6 million deal to acquire Julius Erving.
$6 million.
We then had two important draft picks that worked, Maurice Cheeks and Andrew Toney. That gave us our guard line. We traded George McGinnis to Denver for Bobby Jones, which gave us that wonderful multi-piece player. And then the enormous acquisition of Moses Malone, a $13 million deal, which at that time was absolutely unprecedented. So suddenly we had our franchise, Moses in the middle, Bobby Jones up front, coming off the bench with Julius, Cheeks and Toney the guard line, and we had a team that could play with everybody, and they did. Had a marvelous season, and then met the Lakers, who had kept knocking us out of the playoffs every year, it seemed, and we finally got our revenge and swept them, and we had our title.
An incredible title that people in Philadelphia will never forget, notwithstanding the Eagles last year, but we'll never forget. So 4 years later, the Magic is awarded for a building just a few yards from here, but it's the end of a story, beginning of another one, but that doesn't happen overnight. So tell a little bit about the story of bringing the Magic to Orlando.
Well, I'd been in Philly as the GM for 12 years, but I was getting restless. I needed a new challenge. The ultimate challenge in pro sports, I think, Rick, is to start a team up from scratch, an expansion team. I had met some business leaders here in Orlando, and they kept pursuing me to come on down here and head this up. And finally, I had to make a decision, leave my home area, leave the Sixers, leave a young Charles Barkley, etc., and come down here cold turkey and see if we could rally this community and then sell the NBA, A, on expanding, and B, putting a franchise here in Central Florida in 1986-87. And Rick, this community wasn't much to look at then. It was still quite a small southern town. Anyway, I took the risk, spent, I don't know, the better part of 6 months speaking and yelling and screaming and jumping up and down in the community, and then keeping the NBA posted. Anyway, long story short, in April of 1987, the league was looking at 4 cities that were trying to knock their way in: Miami, Orlando, Charlotte, and Minneapolis. And nobody really got a real sense on this. And finally, the league said, why don't we take all 4 of them? Now, the price to get in was $32.5 million. Time out. Repeat that again. $32.5. $32.5. Right. And value today? Well, listen, teams are selling now for $2 billion. Anyway, Rick, at $32.5, we really felt they had taken advantage of us. Initially, the talk was, it's going to be maybe around $25 million. But 32.5, we were gagged. But finally, each city came up with it, and they took all 4 of us. Miami and Charlotte were to start in the fall of '88. Orlando and Minnesota the fall of '89, and we paid our entry fees. Multiply 32.5 times 4, Rick, and then spread that out among 22 owners. Big payday for them. Back in that era. And a big deal for you. And truth be told, it was interesting because I was part of that group that dealt with the Heat, and you were the reason why people should take Orlando seriously. Nobody knew the Hewitt family. Minnesota has its own, and Charlotte had its own assets as well. And South Florida, clearly sun and fun and sports and transplanted New Yorkers and all, but don't underestimate Orlando because it has Pat Williams. Well, Rick, we worked hard and we got this community fired up. I think one of the things that was huge for us were the deposits, $100 deposits on 14,000 season tickets. That was unheard of, but our community really stepped up and did that. I think that was a huge eye-opener to the league that something was pretty rabid here. And as it turns out, it was. those early years with our franchise where we were playing to sell out crowds and hysterical fans, and it was really a beautiful story.
So this was the time, and you, of course, were around. Your best general manager move was getting the lottery pick and drafting Shaq, right? So was that the heated ping pong ball you got David Stern to do, or the heated envelope? How did that all work?
Well, Rick, actually, for 2 straight years, 92 and 93, the lottery then was understandable. Today it's not.
No, it's not.
But it was really a matter of ping pong balls. There were 66 of them in the machine. Based on the worst record, you had the most balls. 1992, darn if our ball doesn't pop up. And we won it. And everybody was absolutely ecstatic for us, including the commissioner.
Yep.
Great break for this expansion team. There was Shaq. The next year, we missed the playoffs by the 5th tiebreaker and ended up in the lottery. We had 1 out of 66 ping pong balls in that machine. And amazingly enough, guess what happened? Our ball popped up again.
A brilliant general manager move, by the way.
Well,
Brilliant.
Let me tell you this, Rick. Nobody was happy for us that year, including the commissioner.
Right.
I mean, David Stern, that was not the way it was designed. Anyway, that led to all the wheeling and dealing on draft night, and that's how Penny Hardaway got here. So we had this wonderful young nucleus of Shaq and Penny, both 20 years old. We had Dennis Scott here already. We had Nick Anderson. We had a nice young team, and we had a great run. And then in 1996, it all unraveled. Shaq, as a free agent, went to L.A. Penny had both knees go out on him over a period of time, and suddenly we were scrambling all over again.
Yeah, well, but you recover, and that's part of your life. 83 Sixers, 2018 today. Biggest difference between the NBA then and now?
Oh, Rick, I think the first thing that comes to mind is the internationalization of the game. The NBA is being watched in every nation on earth. People are watching games in China and India and Japan, everywhere. Secondly, the players that are coming from all these nations. This year, for example, there are 100 players from other countries. I think 41 countries are represented with players on rosters in the league this year. That's astounding. And I guess the third thing, Rick, is just the enormous value of these franchises. They tell me that every franchise in the league is worth $1 billion. Right. And when you see teams sold for $2 billion, and you think about what are the Lakers worth? What are the Knicks worth, for example?
It would be really good if either of those teams were any good.
Oh, I'll think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
So we've got a league, we got a sport that has really found its stride and has become a worldwide endeavor. And I guess the best way to put it in simple terms, the NBA now is a big deal.
Big deal. But it's also a bigger deal as a platform for doing great by doing good and philanthropy, which, of course, is very important to you. So first, talk a little bit about some of the Magic community initiatives.
Well, the Orlando Magic Youth Foundation, Rick, was founded right at the very beginning of our existence. And we wanted to be good citizens. We wanted to have an impact in the community, particularly with young people. And so through different fundraisers, a gala event, golf tournaments, etc., we have raised a lot of money, given away close to $20 million over a period of about 15 to 16 years, all of it to youth-oriented organizations in Central Florida. It's a pretty tight regimen, what we do, but we've given that money, continue to do that, continue to raise those kind of funds. Yes, we want to be good citizens, but I think it's true, Rick, of all the teams in their communities. I'm really impressed with how NBA franchises have really made an effort to be more than just good citizens, but consistent in their work and their outreach to make a difference in the lives of people that need help.
Yes, but it starts at the top with the co-founder and your commitment to excellence via philanthropy. Personally, 19 kids, 14 adopted from different countries. What have you learned from them, other than you don't have enough time in life to do all this? But and how does it make you a better person?
Well, that's a great question, Rick. We fortunately, the kids are all grown now. The youngest is 32. The oldest is 46. And they're all out of the house, all out on their own. We have 18 grandchildren, which has been another interesting step for us. What have I learned about parenting? Many things, but you've got to have an equal balance of love and discipline. I have learned that. Secondly, your children need your time.
Yeah.
You've got to organize your schedule. And above anything I remember is this, Rick, every morning at breakfast, Dad, are you going to be at our swimming meet today? Dad, are you going to be at our game tonight? Dad, are you going to be at my cheerleading? That was the most important thing to them, that I be there watching them in their events. I still remember that to this day, and they do too. What else can I tell you? Take them to church. Get them involved in Sunday school. And every Sunday we loaded them up into that 18-passenger van and hiked them off to church. One other thing quickly, Rick, is encourage them to be readers. Read to your children.
Yeah.
And get them excited about books, good books. And let them see that you are reading. I don't think there's any really substitute for a young person who loves to read.
But also, good things happen to good people. In 2011, you were diagnosed, which reportedly was with an incurable form of cancer. Yet after a few rounds of chemo, it was not detected. What kind of reaction did you get from your peers? How did you get through it? And what did you take away from all of that?
Well, Rick, that's true. In January of 11, I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, which is one of the blood cancers. And Dr. Reynolds informed me that, this is a 2 or 3 year life expectancy. But he said, we're going to get you on these forms of chemo immediately. He said, there are good new drugs coming all the time. We want to keep you alive long enough to get you on these new medications. All of that has happened, by the way. And they have gotten me on these new forms of chemo, most of them oral. And I'm doing well. I feel good. I'm able to keep my full schedule. And I'm pleased about that. What have I learned? Well, I scream and cry out, Rick, to men everywhere. Yeah. Do not neglect your yearly physical.
Yeah.
That's how they found out with me. And so many men, Rick, I've learned, I don't need to do that. I don't like doctors. I'll take my chances. Not good thinking.
Yeah.
Get the yearly physical. And if there is something wrong, they'll find it.
Oh.
And the earlier they find something, the sooner they can get on it. So
obviously, words to live by. The other side of Pat Williams, there are many sides, and we don't have enough time to cover all the sides, but they're all good sides. 50-plus marathons, Mount Rainier, other mountain climbing. What's the impact on your life of those endeavors? And again, how does that make you a more well-rounded person as well?
Well, Rick, I've always wanted to challenge myself, and I did run a half marathon here. I think I was in my mid-50s, and I finished it, and I thought, boy, that's a pretty big deal. I didn't think I could do that. And right after that, I signed up and said, I wonder if I could do a full marathon. I signed up for the Disney Marathon and did it and finished. I was in tears when I crossed the finish line. That was the hardest thing I'd ever taken on. And so I kept doing it and then ended up running 58 of them, including the Boston Marathon 13 times, just to prove to myself that I could do something hard.
Yeah, well, and you haven't done anything in your life, so I'm trying to figure out why. How you end up doing that?
Those days are over. I ran my 58th, Rick, and the next week I was diagnosed with cancer. So that pretty much put an end to that for me.
Well, but not the spirit. So I guess the final issue I want to pursue is you have such an incredibly well-rounded career and have been a mentor to so many people, including me. The power of sports, generally, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. What do you think is the most pervasive and important element of the power of sports, and why sports has such an obvious impact in being able to change people's lives?
Well, Rick, all I can tell you is this. We live in a sports-crazy nation. everything seems to revolve around high school or college or pro sports. And I think it's important to remember that the athlete, the coach, the executive, the broadcaster, has an enormous platform of influence in our country. And we all need to take that very seriously, that the words we speak, our actions, the way we conduct our lives is impacting millions of people. Now, that's the power of athletics. And so I think it's important for athletes and coaches to be careful about what they say, how they say it. I know we live in a very competitive business, but by the same token, there are millions of eyes watching us, and it's therefore important to be good role models. I think that's more than anything what I've taken from sports in my career in sports.
You're a good friend, and it's an honor to be with you. Thank you, Pat
Hey,
Williams.
Rick, so good to see you. Thanks for coming up.
Lot to learn from Pat Williams, and of course the NBA isn't the only issue dominating the headlines this week and month. It's the Women's World Cup. Bleacher Report's CEO Howard Mittman says that through their vertical, their company has booked more ad revenue from the Women's World Cup than the men's tournament last summer, about 10% higher. Hulu, Adidas, PlayStation, Volkswagen, and otherwise. The advertiser interest has grown considerably since the last Women's World Cup in 2015. Top sponsors include Coca-Cola, Volkswagen, and Verizon. And in 2015, Fox Sports initially said about $40 million in ad sales, even though $17 million was projected. It is fashionable and economic to support the Women's World Cup. How about tickets? FIFA's allocated more than 940,000 tickets to fans around the world, and it looks unlikely attendance at this tournament will surpass the total in 2015 in Canada. That was about 1.3 million. But clearly, biggest names, including the top celebrities, and the spots, the ad spots, supported with cross-channel promotion and distribution all over the soccer network. FanDuel donates to the Women's Sports Foundation for goals by Team USA. FanDuel, offering a variety of contests for the Women's World Cup, contributed $1,000 to the Women's Sports Foundation for every goal Team USA scores during the tournament, and about $10,000 initial donation. The Women's Sports Foundation, dedicated to ensuring all girls and women have equal access to sports and physical activity. Julie Ertz, married to two-time Pro Bowl tight end Zach Ertz of the Eagles, are also partnering with a FanDuel promotion that brings the Eagles in as well. A 7-player pool with a $100 salary cap. FanDuel and soccer merge. In a play that mixes philanthropy and gambling, FanDuel stepped up to support women's sports. Good for them. Twitter buzzing over the Women's World Cup. The analytics team will determine the best tweets throughout the FIFA World Cup and multiple categories from countries, including Argentina, Austria, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Germany, Japan, Mexico, and others. Twitter users can join the conversation about the tournament with a number of different hashtags, and the Twitter and FIFA joint campaign demonstrates a larger global strategy to promote women in sports and the social media platform that will help draw millions of global soccer fans. Good for them. FIFA also negotiating increased prize money for the women's national soccer teams following the Women's World Cup. The news comes after a campaign from the Professional Footballers Australia, the soccer player unions in that country, calling on FIFA to offer the same amount of prize money for women's teams as it does for the men's tournament. The obvious answer is FIFA has agreed to the request to start negotiating, and the Women's World Cup has a prize fund of $30 million. The winners get 4. This is double the amount from 2015. However, it's still in stark contrast to the $400 million on the 2018 Men's World Cup. France got $38 million alone as the winners. A lot of work to do, but you could probably argue that they're heading in the right direction. We'll continue to keep up on all aspects of the Women's World Cup as we move forward. We'll look at one issue that involves the combination of tech and the NBA before we leave the hardwood. Boogie Cousins DeMarcus Cousins. His torn Achilles, by the way, last season cost him about $100 million, but because it happened right as he was entering free agency. As he rehabbed, Cousins joined the Warriors for a mere 5.3 million pennies in this year's NBA economy, per the LA Times. While Cousins should be just fine in many orthopedic applications like Achilles or rotator cuff repair, with traditional materials like allograft or other items, you're limited to the void fractions, porosity, strength, and bioactivity of the raw material, said Jeff Conroy, CEO of Embody, whose goal is to restore peak performance for orthopedic patients through advanced regenerative technologies. We're able to tune the attributes to mimic the native tissue intended to enhance cell remodeling with greater cell adhesion and more tendon-like tissue formation, particularly beneficial in high-demand applications like rotator cuff, ACL, and Achilles repair, where the re-tear rates far exceed an acceptable norm for surgeons or patients. And while Cousins is not an Embody patient or involved with the company, Conroy noted that the Embody's implantable devices might significantly improve patients' outcomes in soft tissue surgical applications and get pro athletes back in record time, not to mention weekend warriors. It is a story definitely worth noting. Let's get to hockey. Big week for the NHL. The St. Louis-Boston series beyond anybody's expectations in terms of interesting rivalry. And the Blues during the tournament have announced an agreement with local healthcare company Centene for naming rights to their new ice center in Maryland Heights. The 10-year agreement sees the new building named the Centene Community Ice Center, ensures the company's branding will feature signage, marketing, and communications, and the venue, which is scheduled to open on September 7, is a $78 million project funded through a public-private partnership with support from the City of Maryland Heights, St. Louis County, and the state of Missouri. The project is part of the Blues 2020 campaign, which aims to bring the local community together through ice hockey. The facility also highlights a renewed effort to engage more youth in ice sports. Clearly, advancing to the Stanley Cup Finals helps the business and helps hockey in Missouri, Kansas, and otherwise. Let's talk golf. U.S. Open upon us. Huge technological expansion for the 2019 Open. Fox has ball speed, swing speed, smash factor, carry distance, 210-degree angle penalty area cameras, and more drones to capture the scenery of the course. More and more, golf and technology are mixing. We even have carry distance, which for golfers like me is pretty dangerous if we start copying it for ourselves. As it unfolds and this technology comes center stage, another device to capture the casual golf fan and make him a larger and more intense golf fan. Hopefully, for the industry, it's successful. Well, how about college? Big 12 Commissioner Bob Bowlesby says the conference will distribute $38.8 million in revenue to each school, up from the $36.5 million last year. The Big 12, by having Oklahoma and Texas in New Year's Six Bowls, gained an additional $6 million. And West Virginia President E. Gordon Gee said that by the time the conference's TV contract with ESPN and Fox Sports expires in 24-25, revenue distribution could reach about $45 million per school. In reality, the Big 12 is a much better financial standing than anyone thought when the conference realignment was discussed yet again about 5 years ago. And speaking of executives looking to redefine their respective conferences, college sports is a big deal, and so is Kevin Warren. He's a trailblazer in the pro football ranks. He's leaving his mark on college sports in the future, just taking the job as the commissioner of the Big Ten. 55 years old, he succeeds Jim Delaney, who's been the Big Ten commissioner since 1989. He's been at the helm of the Minnesota Vikings as a CEO, and 21 years at the NFL. He played a key role in the construction of U.S. Bank Stadium and the TCO Performance Center, and we're lucky enough to have him as a Sport Business Handbook contributor. Certainly looking forward to seeing what he does in the confines of college football. Then finally, here's an issue that might be interesting for all of us that are looking at racing in a different way these days. M&M's has unveiled what it calls the first branded luxury camping experience at a NASCAR race with a new program called M&M's Campground. M&M's will set it up around 30 branded tents in private areas of 2 upcoming NASCAR races at Bristol and Kentucky. The offer goes for $500, though not known how SMI, which owns both tracks, will split it with M&M's. The Mars-owned chocolate brand, which works with Weber Shandwick for its racing program, is offering 20 of the 30 tents to fans to purchase, while reserving 10 of them for VIPs. The program meant for 2 people, and it comes with amenities such as 2 tickets to the race, plus garage and club access, a choice of queen bed or 2 singles, private showers and bathrooms, breakfast, lunch, and dinner catered by local restaurants, and appearances by driver Kurt Busch, his wife Samantha, and NASCAR team owner Joe Gibbs. Now that's what we call a sweet deal, and maybe more importantly, it's a creative marketing opportunity that other racing companies may want to take notice, especially with the large areas around tracks and the amount of free time. Just a suggestion. Well, that's it for Beyond the Scoreboard today. We'd like to thank all of you, including Dan Martin and Tanner Simpkins and Reed Weber for putting this all together. But we'd also like to thank Pat Williams for lending his time and expertise, and iconic Pat Williams for giving us some perspective on the NBA. I'd like to thank you all for listening and watching, and joining us next week when we go Beyond the Scoreboard.